In the bustling town of Eldoria, life moved with predictable rhythms. Shops opened and closed at their usual times, children raced down cobblestone streets, and the elders gathered every evening to reminisce about the days when kings still ruled the lands. Among all the ordinary faces, there was a boy named Liam, quiet, curious, and always carrying a notebook. He loved observing people, sketching scenes of everyday life, and imagining worlds far beyond Eldoria. But Liam was different, not in appearance, but in the way his mind worked. Where others saw rules and limits, Liam saw possibilities. He would often sit in the town square, watching the crowd, and think about what it would be like if he were someone important, someone extraordinary. One day, as he wandered through the marketplace, he overheard a group of merchants talking about the old royal family. The kingdom had been without a king for decades, ever since the tragic disappearance of Prince Alaric, the heir to the throne. No one knew where he had gone or what had happened to him. Some said he had been kidnapped, others whispered that he had been hidden to protect him from enemies. The story had become a legend, a tale told to children before bedtime, usually ending with, "Maybe he will return one day, when the time is right." Liam smirked to himself and muttered, almost jokingly, "What if I were the lost prince? Would anyone believe it?" He laughed at the idea, shaking his head. To him, it was just a silly thought, a fleeting daydream. But what he didn't know was that destiny had a sense of humor, and it had heard his joke. A few days later, Eldoria announced the opening of a new government service. The Birthmark scanner, a revolutionary device designed to identify descendants of the royal family. It used genetic mapping and historical records to verify the bloodline of anyone claiming royal heritage. It was primarily meant for historians, researchers, and distant relatives who wanted to prove their lineage. It was not for commoners like Liam, or so everyone assumed. Curiosity tugged at Liam relentlessly. One evening, when the streets were empty and the sunset painted golden streaks across the sky, he slipped into the hall where the scanner was kept. The hall smelled of polished wood and old parchment. Its walls were lined with portraits of kings and queens, all staring down as if waiting for someone to awaken the past. Liam stepped hesitantly into the scanner chamber. The machine hummed softly, its lights flickering like tiny stars. He could feel his heart thudding against his chest, partly from fear and partly from the thrill of a harmless adventure. "Here goes nothing," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The scanner started whirring. A soft glow illuminated Liam's face, and then unexpectedly it paused. The machine flashed, beeped, and the screen lit up in bright letters. "Confirmed, heir of the royal bloodline." Liam froze. His joke, the thing he had said in jest, was suddenly the truth. His mind raced. How could this be? He, Liam, the boy from the small town with nothing but a notebook and dreams, was the lost prince? Tears blurred his vision. For a moment he wanted to laugh, to scream, to tell everyone. It was just a joke. But deep down, a strange warmth spread through him. Something ancient, something powerful, awakened inside. He felt a connection to the stories he had grown up with, to the family he had never known, to the destiny he had never imagined. But reality hit him hard. If the scanner was correct, this news could change everything. His life, the town, even the kingdom itself. Would the people believe him? Would enemies emerge from the shadows, seeking to harm him as they had the missing prince decades ago? And most frightening of all, could he handle the weight of a crown he had never asked for? As he left the hall that evening, Liam's mind was a storm of thoughts and emotions. He walked through the quiet streets, the golden sunset casting long shadows behind him. Every step felt heavier, but also purposeful, as if the universe had nudged him forward. The world he had once known, the safe, predictable life of Eldoria, was slipping away, and in its place rose something uncertain, terrifying, but undeniably extraordinary. That night, Liam sat by his window, staring at the stars. He thought of the legends, the prophecies, and the tales of courage he had read in old books. He remembered the words of the storyteller who had visited Eldoria years ago. Sometimes, the smallest voice can awaken the greatest destiny. Liam didn't know if he was ready to accept that destiny, but he knew one thing. His life had changed forever. The joke he had made had turned into reality, and there was no turning back. As the first whispers of dawn crept into the sky, Liam made a silent promise to himself. He would discover the truth about who he was, confront the shadows of the past, and rise to meet the destiny that had been waiting for him. Even if the journey was filled with danger, heartbreak, and unimaginable trials. And somewhere, in the deep corridors of the kingdom's forgotten history, the walls of a long empty throne room seemed to shiver, as if acknowledging the return of the lost prince. The days after the scanner's revelation were some of the longest in Liam's life. Every morning, he woke up expecting the world to feel the same, only to realize that nothing would ever be normal again. The town of Eldoria seemed smaller now, the streets narrower, the familiar faces somehow distant. He walked past the marketplace, past the schoolyard, past the little bakery where Mrs. Harlow always smiled at him. But he felt like a stranger in his own life that he tried to tell himself it was impossible. A lost prince after decades, simply appearing as an ordinary boy? It was absurd. But the scanner's confirmation burned in his mind like a brand. Heir of the royal bloodline. Liam knew he had to find answers. That evening, he returned to the hall that housed the scanner, hoping to meet the historian who had supervised the tests. The hall was silent, its corridors echoing his footsteps. At the center, an elderly man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose awaited him. His name was Professor Alden, a man known for his meticulous research into the royal lineage. "You've returned," the professor said, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "I expected you would. Few are ready for what the scanner reveals." I don't understand," Liam admitted. "How can this be true? How am I him?" Professor Alden nodded solemnly. "The scanner never lies. You carry the mark of Prince Alaric. The birthmark on your shoulder, the genetic markers, even your fingerprints, they all match the royal archives. You are the lost prince." Liam swallowed hard. "But why didn't anyone find me before? Where was I all this time?" "The kingdom has been in hiding," the professor explained. "Enemies of the crown have always sought to eliminate the royal line. You were hidden by loyal guardians, separated from your heritage, and raised where danger could not find you. You were meant to survive until the kingdom was ready to reclaim its prince." Liam's mind reeled. He remembered fragments of his childhood, dreams of a distant castle, a lullaby sung by a woman he could barely recall, the sense of being watched yet safe. He had dismissed these memories as imagination, but now they made horrifying, beautiful sense. I need to see it," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "The castle, my home." Professor Alden hesitated. "It's not safe yet. The throne is contested. Shadows linger from the old wars. Some still wish to prevent your return. But if you are ready..." He handed Liam a map, ancient and fragile, showing secret routes through forests, mountains, and hidden valleys leading to the abandoned royal palace. That night, Liam packed what little belongings he had, his notebook, a few clothes, and a locket he had never opened, and left Eldoria under the cover of darkness. The wind was sharp against his face as he ran, his heart pounding not just from fear, but from anticipation. Every step took him closer to the truth, and every shadow seemed to whisper warnings. The journey was arduous. Liam crossed rivers that glimmered like silver in the moonlight, climbed cliffs where the rocks cut his hands, and navigated forests so dense he felt swallowed by them. Along the way, he felt a strange presence, as though someone, or something, was following him. He would turn, heart hammering, but see nothing. Only once in the glow of dawn, did he glimpse a figure atop a ridge. A man cloaked in darkness, watching him with sharp, calculating eyes. Liam could not tell if it was friend or foe. Finally, after days of travel, the silhouette of the palace emerged from the mist. It was massive, grand, yet worn by time and neglect. The walls that had once gleamed with golden banners were now cracked and draped with ivy. The towers reached into the clouds, defiant against the decay of centuries. Liam's heart surged with emotion. He had never imagined a place so magnificent, so alive with memory. Inside, the palace was eerily quiet. Dust coated every surface, and the echo of his footsteps filled the empty halls. Yet as he walked through the throne room, a strange warmth settled over him. The air hummed with anticipation, and for the first time he felt the presence of his ancestors, kings and queens who had ruled with wisdom, courage, and compassion. In the grand hall, he saw portraits of Prince Alaric, his own features strikingly familiar. His jawline, his eyes, even the slight curl of his hair. He saw himself staring back from centuries past. Liam touched the painting, and a surge of understanding coursed through him. This was not just a house, it was a legacy waiting to be reclaimed. But as dawn broke over the palace, danger revealed itself. Shadows moved across the walls. Figures cloaked in black, armed and silent, emerging from hidden passages. Liam's heart raced. The stories of enemies who had tried to prevent Prince Alaric's return were not myths. They were real, and now they were here. Liam ran, guided by instinct and memory that was more than just his own. He ducked behind columns, vaulted over fallen banners, and barely escaped the clutches of the attackers. In his flight, he stumbled upon a secret chamber, a small room filled with relics of the royal family. There he found a small, intricately carved chest. Inside were letters, journals, and a sword with a jewel-encrusted hilt. The sword seemed to hum in his hands, resonating with the same warmth he had felt in the throne room. The letters told a story of courage, loss, and hope. They were messages to the future prince, written by those who had protected him. They spoke of love, betrayal, and the promise that he would one day reclaim the throne. Liam felt tears streaming down his face. For the first time, he understood that his journey was not just about discovery. It was about duty, legacy, and courage. As he absorbed the words, he heard voices outside the chamber. The attackers had found him again. Liam gripped the sword tightly, his fear giving way to determination. He was no longer just a boy from Eldoria. He was the lost prince, heir to a kingdom that had waited for him through decades of shadow. The fight that followed was unlike anything he had imagined. He dodged, blocked, and countered with instincts he did not know he had. The sword seemed to guide him, responding to his will, striking with precision and power. Each movement was a dance of survival and awakening, a testament to the bloodline that ran through him. When the last attacker fell, Liam collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily, heart pounding. The palace was silent once more. He looked around, feeling the weight of what had just happened. This was only the beginning. Shadows still lingered, enemies still plotted, and the truth of his identity had yet to be revealed to the world. But he had survived, and in surviving, he had awakened to the power of who he was. For the first time, Liam allowed himself a moment of peace. He sat in the throne room, gazing at the empty seat that awaited him, and whispered, "I am here. I will not fail." The journey ahead would test him, emotionally, mentally, and physically. He would face betrayal, heartbreak, and choices that would shape the fate of the kingdom. But he knew one thing with certainty. He was no longer just a boy joking about being a lost prince. He was the prince, and the world would soon know it. And somewhere in the distant lands, the forces that had hidden him, the allies who had protected him, and the enemies who had hunted him, all felt the stirrings of a story that was far from over. The morning sun cast its first golden rays across the towers of the abandoned palace, igniting the worn stones with a brilliance that belied decades of neglect. Liam stood in the throne room, sword in hand, chest still heaving from the previous night's battle. The silence around him was not empty, it was expectant, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. For years, it had waited for this moment, and now finally, its lost prince had returned. Yet Liam's heart was heavy. The kingdom was not yet safe. The enemies who had once sought to destroy his lineage still lingered, hidden in the shadows of neighboring lands, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had survived the first encounter, but the real test was ahead, reclaiming the throne, uniting a fractured kingdom, and proving to the world that the blood of heroes still ran strong. Professor Alden had been right. Liam was not just a boy, he was a symbol, and symbols inspired hope. He took a deep breath, letting the weight of his heritage settle on his shoulders. The locket around his neck, a keepsake from his unknown mother, gleamed in the morning light, reminding him that he carried not just a name, but a legacy of courage, wisdom, and love. Word of his return spread faster than any messenger could deliver. Townsfolk from Eldoria, curious travelers, and loyalists of the Old Kingdom began gathering at the palace gates. Rumors, whispered at first, grew louder. The lost prince has returned. Children pointed from the streets, eyes wide with wonder. Farmers paused in their fields. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Even distant soldiers who had abandoned hope of ever seeing the royal line alive again felt a spark of excitement they had not known in decades. But not all were welcoming. Across the northern mountains, the old enemies, the exiled nobles and mercenaries who had schemed to end Prince Alaric's line, felt the tremor of change in the air. They gathered in secret, plotting to crush the boy who had become a symbol of hope before he could solidify his power. Their hatred, though long dormant, was as fierce as ever. Liam knew he could not face them alone. He needed allies, and so he called upon the citizens who still remembered the old kingdom, not just for its glory, but for its values. Knights who had sworn loyalty to the crown, scholars who had preserved the knowledge of the past, and even humble villagers who had heard stories of the lost prince, answered his call. They came not for wealth, not for power, but because they believed in something greater. A chance to see justice, courage, and humanity triumph once more. The first confrontation came swiftly. At the palace gates, the enemy forces appeared, banners blackened with old insignias of betrayal. Liam stood before his people, sword in hand, not as a frightened boy, but as a leader rising to meet his destiny. He raised the sword, its jewel-encrusted hilt catching the sunlight. "I am Liam," he declared, voice strong and unwavering. "Heir of this kingdom. Son of a line that has endured centuries. And today, we reclaim what was stolen." The crowd erupted. Voices unified in a roar of support that shook the very walls. Knights charged forward. Villagers armed with courage, and even children, wide-eyed and determined, stood at the edges, holding torches that flickered like fireflies against the morning sky. The battle was fierce. Liam moved with a grace that belied his age. Every strike of his sword precise, every decision calculated. Yet this was not just skill. It was instinct, courage, and the blood of generations guiding him. He fought not for glory, not for revenge, but for the people who had suffered under neglect, for the lost traditions, and for the hope that the kingdom could rise again. Amid the clash, Liam's heart carried a heavier burden, compassion. He spared those who surrendered, tended to the wounded, and inspired his allies with acts of bravery that felt almost superhuman. Every time a villager or soldier faltered, he lifted them, reminded them why they fought, and reminded himself why he had survived. This was the essence of heroism. Not the sword, but the spirit. Hours passed, and by midday the battlefield fell silent. The enemies lay defeated or had fled into the mountains, their plans shattered by the unity of a kingdom that refused to remain broken. Liam stood amidst the aftermath, bloodied and bruised, but unbroken. His people approached, faces alight with awe and gratitude, their voices chanting his name. "Liam! Liam! Our prince!" It was in that moment, standing atop the palace steps, overlooking a sea of loyal citizens, that Liam understood the full weight and wonder of his identity. He was not just a boy who had joked about being a lost prince. He was proof that even in the darkest times, courage, compassion, and human resilience could light the way. Tears streamed down his face as he raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "This kingdom belongs to all of us," he said. "Not to one ruler, not to fear, not to hatred, but to the people, to hope, and to the future we will build together. We are stronger than any shadow, braver than any enemy, and united as one, we will never be lost again." The crowd erupted in joyous cheers, their voices echoing across the valleys and mountains, carrying hope to distant lands. Liam's mother's lullaby, a memory long forgotten, seemed to resonate in the wind. For the first time, he truly felt whole. He had faced the shadows of his past, the dangers of the present, and emerged as a symbol of the future. In the days that followed, Liam worked tirelessly. He restored the palace, rebuilt alliances, and implemented reforms to heal the kingdom from years of neglect. He sought out old enemies, not to punish unnecessarily, but to teach the power of forgiveness and unity. Slowly, Eldoria transformed from a kingdom of whispered legends to a thriving nation of hope and courage. And though he faced challenges, betrayals, and the constant weight of expectation, Liam never lost the spark that had defined him as a boy. Curiosity, kindness, and the desire to see the good in others. He had become more than a prince. He had become a hero, not just in title, but in spirit. The legend of the lost prince spread far and wide, inspiring generations. Songs were sung, stories were written, and children across the kingdom looked to the stars at night, dreaming that one day, they too could rise, face impossible odds, and make a difference. Liam's journey became more than his own. It became the story of humanity's enduring spirit, the proof that even in the darkest times light, courage, and hope could prevail. And as Liam stood once more in the throne room, gazing at the golden sunrise streaming through the high windows, he whispered to himself, a quiet smile forming on his lips. I was lost, but now I am home, and this kingdom will never be the same again. The palace walls seemed to shimmer with life, as if acknowledging the return of its rightful heir. History had turned a page, and the story of a boy who joked about being a lost prince had become a legend that would echo through time, forever a tale of courage, hope, and the undeniable power of human spirit.